Hare Krishna, is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so we'll start with the Mangalacharan. Om Majnana Jimirandasya, Yana Anjana Shalakaya, Chakshurun Nilchamena Tasmai Sri Guru Nama, Sri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Tapitam Yena Bhutali, Swayam Rupagadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam, Vandeyam Sri Guru Sri Yuddhapatakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavasya, Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Stamsa Jivam, Sadvaitam Saudutam Paljana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam, Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitam Sha, He Krishna Karna Sindhu Jinabandhu Jagatpati, Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste, तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Hare Krishna. So we are still in chapter 11 of the first canto. We have covered up to verse 20 so far. So this chapter is actually about Krishna's arrival at Dwarka, and all the residents, especially Krishna's relatives, the Yaduvanshis, they are all very excited to see him return, and therefore they are also in that ecstatic mood of recalling all his glories, and they are also praising him like the residents of Hastinapur. They are all singing his glories. So we have seen those descriptions in the first 20 verses. So today we'll continue with verse 21. Bhagavams tatra bandhunam pauranam anuvartinam yata vidhi upasangamya sarve shamanam adade. Bhagavams tatra bandhunam pauranam anuvartinam yata vidhi upasangamya sarve shamanam adade. Bhagavams tatra bandhunam pauranam anuvartinam yata vidhi upasangamya sarve shamanam adade. Bhagavams tatra bandhunam pauranam anuvartinam yata vidhi upasangamya sarve shamanam adade. So anyone?
Hare Krishna, sir. I try.
Yeah. Okay.
Bhagavan tatra bandhunam pauranam anuvattinam yatta vidhi upasangamnya sarve samana adate. Hare Krishna, sir.
Yeah. Okay, Mataji, but just that for this the with the ba on top, so you have to say it like anuvattinam mana adade.
Mana adade. Okay, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, no one. Okay, we'll proceed with the synonyms. Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, Tatra, in that place. Bandhunam, of the friends, Pauranam, of the citizens, Anuvartinam, those who approached him to receive and welcome, Yata Vidhi, as it behooves, Upasangamya, going nearer, Sarvesham, for each and everyone, Manam, honor and respects are they offered. Translation: Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, approached them and offered due honor and respect to each and every one of the friends, relatives, citizens, and all others who came to receive and welcome him. So here we can see that he was reciprocating in the past 20 verses, meaning in the first 20 verses of this chapter, we saw how the citizens and Krishna's relatives and friends were singing his praises and how they were describing him. Now, in this verse, it is described about how Krishna was reciprocating to everyone, regardless of their regardless of whether the person was just a normal citizen or his close relative. But the keyword here is Yatha Vidhi, as it behooves. So we'll look at the explanation later in the purport. The Supreme Lord, personality of Godhead, is neither impersonal nor an inert object unable to reciprocate the feelings of his devotees. Here the word Yatha Vidhi, or just as it behooves, is significant. He reciprocates just as it behooves with his different types of admirers and devotees. Of course, the pure devotees are of one type only because they have no other object for service but the Lord. And therefore, the Lord also reciprocates with such pure devotees, just as it behooves. Namely, he is always attentive to all the matters of his pure devotees. There are others who designate him as impersonal, and so the Lord also does not take any personal interest. He satisfies everyone in terms of one's development of spiritual consciousness. And a sample of such reciprocation is exhibited here with these different welcomers. So the Lord is never impartial, as stated in the Gita, chapter 9, in 9.29. Krishna says, Samam Sarvabhuteshu, Name Deshu Asti Napriya, Ye Badanti Tumam Bhaktya, Maiteteshu Chapyam. So the Lord is never, he neither hates or desires, like he doesn't show special preference. He does not really discriminate between the living entities. It's just that he reciprocates according to the way how the living beings interact with him. So this is also a significant aspect to be understood, even among the theistic community, because as we know, regarding the three features of Bhagavan realization, as in the Gita, there is a description in the purport for verse 2.2, where the first half of the purport deals with the description of the three levels of Bhagavan realization. And also in Bhagavatam also, there is a verse which talks about the three levels, impersonal Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan realization. Bhagavan realization is the full, the topmost level, which provides for the complete understanding of the absolute truth. So that even in the introduction to Bhagavatam, in the first canto, Srila Prabhupada starts the introduction by he completely distinguishes between the concept of God and absolute truth. The topmost aspect is that of absolute truth. And Prabhupada talks about the notion of God as being any Vibhutimat Sattva or any empowered being. So even the demigods are also considered as controllers, but there's only one supreme controller, and that is the absolute truth. So understanding this aspect of Bhagavan realization is not just important for the theistic community, but it is also important to understand the uh, the topmost uh, feature, like those who understand Krishna as Param Satyam, as the absolute truth, they will also be able to understand the difference between demigod worship and worshipping the Supreme. So there will be no disputes regarding disrespect of demigods and all that. And even when we talk about understanding the absolute truth, even for those who the theistic people who even accept the concept of absolute truth, those who accept the concept of one God, even for them, this understanding of the impersonal Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan, even that becomes quite challenging, because as mentioned by Krishna himself in the Gita, in 7.24, Krishna says, Avyaktam Vyaktim Apanam Manyate Mam Abudaya. Only the less intelligent people think that I was impersonal before, and now I've taken this personal form. So even in that verse, Krishna is clearly demolishing this notion of impersonalism. And interestingly, in the Gita, this verse 7.24 comes right after the few verses which talk about demigod worship. So in Gita 7.20-21, Krishna talks about how people who are less intelligent worship different demigods. But even when they worship the different demigods, even those benedictions which appear to, which seem like they are actually being awarded by those demigods, even those are actually sanctioned by me. So in those verses from 7.20, Krishna starts to talk about demigod worship, and then slowly in 7.24 also he's talking about he's actually demolishing this concept of impersonalism being the topmost level of realization of the absolute truth. So when we talk about realization of the absolute truth, the Bhagavan realization is the topmost, and the others like impersonal Brahman and Paramatma are only partial realizations. In fact, even Paramatma realization is like much higher than mere impersonal Brahman realization. However, even among the theistic community, by and large, a lot of schools of thought under the theistic community, they still believe in this notion of impersonalism, despite the fact that Krishna himself demolishes that notion, like in Gita, and also in Bhagavatam, we can clearly see the differences between the three features. And also there are descriptions which clearly distinguish between the three levels. So the reason why we must clearly understand the distinction between these three levels of realizing the absolute truth is that only then we will be able to interact with the Supreme Lord in such a way that we get the complete benefit. I mean, it's not that we have to interact merely to get benefits. The interaction will be in a proper way. So if we actually understand the concept of Bhagavan being the topmost level of realization of absolute truth, then we can also enjoy the personal association of the Supreme Lord after being elevated to the spiritual world. So that is why it's important to be absolutely clear about this notion of impersonalism versus the Bhagavata thought. Those who those who actually believe only in the impersonalist view, they will also get to attain the absolute truth, but only in the impersonal Brahmajyoti, because that itself is their goal, which was set by themselves. So that's why here the word yatavidi, or just as it behooves, is significant. Krishna always reciprocates according to how the devotees or even the impersonalists interact with him. For those who regard Krishna as merely uh, part of the Brahmajyoti, those who equate Krishna as the Brahmajyoti, they will also merge into the Brahmajyoti, but they can never enjoy the personal association of Krishna, unlike the devotees who worship the personal feature of Krishna with proper understanding of the topmost Bhagavan realization. They can enjoy the personal association of Krishna in the spiritual world, especially in Goloka Vrindavan. So even in Gita 4.11, Krishna says, Ye yatamam prapatite tans tateva bhadamayam. So Krishna reciprocates according to the way how the devotees interact with him. So for those who merely regard Krishna as those who merely equate Krishna to the Brahmajyoti, then of course they are going to merge into the Brahmajyoti, but they can never enjoy the personal association of Krishna, unlike the devotees who worship the personal feature of Krishna. So if we are going to, for those who have actually revived their dormant Krishna consciousness, it is best to not just to get it done, but it is also important to get it right. So that's why our acharyas have actually made it very easy for us by prescribing Bhakti Yoga as the ideal yoga system. And especially in the Bhagavata school, in our Bhagavata school, it has been made very clear about why we should be absorbed in worshipping the personal form of Krishna, so that we can attain that. Krishna merely awards us according to how we interact with him. So that's the importance of understanding the personal feature of the Supreme Lord. And as mentioned in this verse, Yatavidi, it is not only talking about how Krishna was interacting with the residents of Dwaraka. The larger meaning of it is about how Krishna actually interacts with the devotees, even for those who are part of the theistic schools. Of course, even in Gita 7.15 and 16, Krishna talks about those who do not surrender to him and those who surrender to him. But even for those who are part of the theistic community, even if they don't understand the topmost feature of realizing the absolute truth, then even their spiritual journey may not attain the highest benefit. So that's why it is important to not just engage in Bhakti Yoga, but it is also important to understand the difference between the between impersonalism and the personalist school of thought. But in our Sampradaya, our acharyas have clearly made it clear for us that the ideal prescription is that of Bhakti Yoga and worshipping the personal form of Krishna. Text 22. The Almighty Lord greeted everyone present by bowing his head, exchanging greetings, embracing, shaking hands, looking and smiling, giving assurances, and awarding benedictions, even to the lowest in rank. To receive the Lord Sri Krishna, there were all grades of population, beginning from Vasudeva, Ugrasena, and Gargamuni, the father, grandfather, and teacher, down to the prostitutes and chandalas, who are accustomed to eat dogs, and every one of them was properly greeted by the Lord in terms of rank and position as pure living entities. all are the separated parts and parcels of the Lord, and thus no one is alien by his eternal relation. Such pure living entities are graded differently in terms of contamination of the modes of material nature, but the Lord is equally affectionate to all his parts and parcels, despite material gradation. He descends only to recall these materialistic living beings back to his kingdom, and intelligent persons take advantage of this facility offered by the personality of Godhead to all living beings. No one is rejected by the Lord from the kingdom of God, and it remains with the living being to accept this or not. So, apart from Krishna reciprocating with all the residents, we can also see that even the lowest among the residents of Dwarka, uh, even they were conscious about uh, Krishna being the supreme personality of Godhead, and therefore all the residents, they were behaving very affectionately towards Krishna. Of course, even in all the dhams like Mathura, Vrindavan, Dwarka, in all these dhams, only the most fortunate devotees were blessed to live and enjoy the personal association of with Krishna. And therefore, we can see from this description that the entire community, regardless of their social status, they were all very affectionate towards Krishna. And as mentioned earlier, the Supreme Lord never discriminates the living entities, because to him we are only jivas. It is due to our foolishness that we wanted to enjoy material sense gratification that we have degraded ourselves to this position. Though we were originally spirit souls, due to our foolishness of wanting to enjoy material sense gratification, we have actually trapped ourselves within this material body. But for the Supreme Lord, he who knows everything, he only identifies us as his parts and parcels, as he himself also mentions in the Gita 15.7, Mama Yamamso Jivaloke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. Krishna identifies us as his eternal fragmental parts. So even in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, in that intro, Srila Prabhupada explains that the Bhagavad Gita deals with 5 subject matters: Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala, Karma. So that is also very significant, because the teachings of the Gita are clearly meant for jivas, meaning that it is meant for all living entities. However, it was communicated by Lord Krishna to Arjuna only because we as human beings, we are able to utilize the knowledge of the Gita, though it is actually meant for all living entities, regardless of their material designation, regardless of whether the living being is encased in the body of a dog, cat, or a human being. The knowledge of Gita and Bhagavatam, this knowledge is actually beneficial for all living entities to reawaken their dormant Krishna consciousness and to liberate themselves from the material bondage. However, it is very unfortunate that the lower forms of life, they cannot understand this knowledge. Only we as human beings can understand it, and such is our significant position in this material world. Even Brahma and all the demigods, even they acknowledge the advantageous position of human beings, especially in the 3rd canto of Bhagavatam. Even in that part, Brahma actually talks about how fortunate are human beings to actually to be, because human beings are actually able to engage in devotional service and liberate themselves from this middle earth planet. Though even the demigods, the sages in the upper planets, even they have to engage in Krishna consciousness. But we, though we are actually in this middle planet, even we also have the advantage of being liberated to the spiritual world. So such is the advantages and significant position of us as human beings in this material world. So it is extremely unfortunate if people do not understand the significance of this human form of life. If people are not willing to value this this birth in the human form of life, and if people are completely oblivious to the secret knowledge of Gita and Bhagavatam, then they may not be able to get this precious opportunity again. So for devotees who have been very fortunate enough to actually encountered their Brahma Jignasa moment and to be blessed with this knowledge of Krishna consciousness thanks to the our acharyas. So we have the opportunity to understand this knowledge and also to liberate ourselves from this material bondage. But even for other living entities, as they progress in according to their different levels, they can also gradually liberate themselves from the material bondage. But ironically, the animals who do not have any opportunity of being engaged in spiritual inquiry or devotional service, of course they don't have any chance at all. But human beings who have actually been blessed with the opportunity, they actually choose to live like animals by being only being interested in the business of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. However, as it's clearly stated here, that the Lord descends only to recall these materialistic living beings. So it remains with the living beings to accept this or not. It has been clearly stated in all the scriptures that only the human beings are able to understand this knowledge related to Krishna consciousness, and therefore the onus is completely on us to make the most out of it. So we really have to value the efforts of our acharyas, and of course, even through our preaching efforts, we may be able to reawaken the dormant Krishna consciousness in other people. But of course, that too depends on the intensity of our own sadhana. Text 23. Then the Lord personally entered the city accompanied by elderly relatives and invalid brahmanas with their wives. Others also praised the glories of the Lord. The brahmanas in society were never attentive to banking money for future retired life. When they were old invalids, they used to approach with their wives the assembly of the kings, and simply by praising the glorious deeds performed by the kings, they would be provided with all necessities of life. Such brahmanas were not, so to speak, flatterers of the kings, but the kings were actually glorified by their actions, and they were sincerely still more encouraged in pious acts by such brahmanas in a dignified way. Lord Sri Krishna is worthy of all glories, and the praying brahmanas and others were glorified themselves by chanting the glories of the Lord. So apart from the brahmana community in the previous ages, even our acharyas, they have all lived a very austere life with almost negligible material possessions, and their lives were always focused on propagating the knowledge of Krishna consciousness, whether it is even in the case of Srila Prabhupada, he was simply given two basic instructions by his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur instructed Srila Prabhupada to preach to the Western world and also to print books. So in both the tasks, it is all about preaching the knowledge of Krishna consciousness, and therefore the Brahmana community and also our acharyas, they have always been completely absorbed in this task of propagating the knowledge of Krishna consciousness. Even the word Brahmana itself means Brahma Jana Iti Brahmana. So a Brahmana is someone who propagates the knowledge of Brahman, that is the Supreme Brahman. So by propagating the knowledge about the Supreme Brahman, the Brahmana community, they have been able to alert the otherwise materialistic society. Of course, I'm actually talking about the past during the Vedic age, where the Brahmanas would often go to the houses of Grihasthas, and by preaching to the Grihasthas, even the Grihasthas will always be living as Grihasthas and not Grihamedis. There is a difference between Grihastha and Grihamedi. According to the Varnashrama Dharma, the Grihastha Ashrama is the householder order of life, which is according to Krishna consciousness. However, householders who are completely oblivious to the principles of Krishna consciousness, they are called Grihamedis. So the Brahmana community, they have always been instrumental in making sure that even the householders would lead their lives according to the principles of Krishna consciousness. And in return, the householders would give donations to the Brahmanas, and therefore the Brahmanas could still lead their lives with simply to fulfill the bare minimum necessities of their life. So this was actually the case in the previous yugas, especially in the proper Vedic age. But due to the degradation of Kali Yuga, nowadays Brahmanas have always become the soft target of many parties with vested interests. They are being targeted as the most demoniac community by the demons themselves, and due to the absence of understanding of scriptures, even among our community, we are also falling prey to these such demoniac propaganda. Very often we hear this that especially in Tamil Nadu, certain political parties they propagate hate towards the Brahmanas by saying that the Brahmanas are discriminating against other castes. First of all, it is completely foolish to equate the Brahmana community with any caste, because as we know from the Gita itself, Brahmana is actually a Varna, it is not a caste. Even the word caste itself is a foreign word. So that is one thing. And the biggest type of attack against the Brahmana community comes from the fact that it is said all these demoniac parties, they attack the Brahmana community by saying that the Brahmanas do not allow other people to enter the sanctum sanctorium of temples. So based on that logic, if everyone should enter the sanctum sanctorium of a temple, so by the same logic, can we actually let all the passengers of aircrafts to enter the cockpit? Obviously not. Those who want to enter the cockpit, those who want to sit there, they should have proper training. So these so-called rationalists and atheists, they will never talk about such things. They will never go board any aircraft and fight for their equal rights to enter into the cockpit, even without having proper knowledge and training. So even to become a Brahmana, as it has been mentioned in the Gita itself in verse 4.13, and also in verses 18.40 to 18.44, the Varna system is only based on gunas and karmas. So any person who has the qualities, he can actually develop the qualities by being engaged in the certain occupation which is related to that Varna. Even in the example of our great rishis like Valmiki and Vyasdev, they were not Brahmanas by birth. However, in all the temples, the Brahmanas recite Ramayana, which was composed by Valmiki, and Mahabharata, which was composed by Vyasadeva. And both these sages, they were never Brahmins by birth. So that itself demolishes this negative propaganda that Brahmanas are Brahmanas by birth, or Brahmanas are discriminating against others. So all such nonsense can be countered if we have proper understanding of our scriptures. And even to understand the scriptures, we actually need the assistance of the Brahmana community, and even our acharyas. They live their lives as Brahmanas. They did not merely fight for rights. They did not blindly agitate for the rights to enter into the sanctum sanctorium, because that is not the only duty of a Brahmana. There are 6 duties of a Brahmana. So out of which propagating the knowledge of Krishna consciousness is the topmost duty. So those who attack the Brahmana community, they don't even understand these basic facts about the Varna system. They don't even know the difference between Varna and Ashrama. So without proper understanding about all this, they simply tend to spread malicious propaganda. And even within our theistic community, a lot of people fall prey to such negative propaganda. Text 24. When Lord Krishna passed over the public roads, all the ladies from the respectable families of Dwarka went up to their roofs of their palaces just to have a look at the Lord. They considered this to be the greatest festival. To have a look at the Lord is a great festive occasion, undoubtedly, as it was considered by the metropolitan ladies of Dwarka. This is still followed by the devout ladies of India, especially during the days of the Julana and Janmashtami ceremonies. The ladies of India still throng up in the greatest number at the temple of the Lord, where his transcendental eternal form is worshipped. The transcendental form of the Lord installed in a temple is not different from the Lord personally. Such a form of the Lord is called Archa Vigraha, or the Archa incarnation, and is expanded by the Lord by his internal potency just to facilitate the devotional service of his innumerable devotees who are in the material world. The material senses cannot perceive the spiritual nature of the Lord, and therefore the Lord accepts the Archa Vigraha, which is apparently made of material elements like earth, wood, and stone, but actually there's no material contamination. Even in the Gita, in chapter 12, Arjuna starts the chapter with a query where he asks Lord Krishna about the proper method of worship. Arjuna asks Lord Krishna whether uh, is worshipping your impersonal form the correct method, or worshipping your personal form the proper method of worship, to which Krishna answers in Gita 12.2, saying that worshipping my personal form is the best method of worship. And then in the following verses, like verse 3, 4, and 5 of chapter 12 of the Gita, Krishna gives further explanation. And verse number 5 in Gita chapter 12 is especially important, where Krishna explains Klesho adhikataras chesham avyakta sakta chetasam avyakta hi gatir dukkam deha vadil avapyate. In that verse, Krishna says that for those who are actually embodied souls like us, we are embodied, we are spirit souls embodied in this material body, and we are very much under the influence of this material nature, and therefore it is not easy for us to focus our mind on something that is void or impersonal. So that's why worshipping the personal form of the Supreme Lord is the best method of worship, as explained by Krishna himself in chapter 12 of the Gita. So worshipping the Archa Vigraha is the best method, despite the fact that the deity is made of material elements. Though the deity is made of material elements, the Supreme Lord pervades into the deity itself, because the Supreme Lord has the ability to transform his different forms of energy. The Supreme Lord has his spiritual energy and also his material energy. So though the deity might appear to be a material object, but he transforms it into a spiritual object, and that's how deity worship is done. The Lord being Kaivalya, one alone, there is no matter in him. He is one without a second, and therefore the Almighty Lord can appear in any form without being contaminated by the material conception. Therefore, festivities in the temple of the Lord, as held generally, are like festivals performed during the manifestive days of the Lord of Dwaraka about 5,000 years ago. So the festivals that we are observing now in the age of Kali are to be regarded as equal to those days that were celebrated as festivals when the Supreme Lord was actually present in this material world. So devotees should not think that they are merely following the procession of the deity. We should understand that the deity is Krishna himself. So that's why this service of deity worship is not easy, and it is completely illogical to expect everyone to engage in deity worship. So those so-called, those self-proclaimed rationalists and atheists, though they call themselves atheists, they only target one particular religion, because they don't have the courage to talk about other religions. So such self-proclaimed rationalists and atheists, they say that everyone should be allowed to enter the sanctum sanctorium, but this service of deity worship is not easy. First of all, even among the devotees, not everyone can understand the concept of deity itself. A lot of people are still confused between idol worship and deity worship. So for those who regard the deity as a material object, so such people are completely not qualified for this deity worship service. So it really takes a very elevated devotee to perform such service, and therefore it is completely illogical to expect that everyone can be allowed into the sanctum sanctorium of a temple. So it is as ridiculous as expecting that all the passengers of an aircraft should be allowed into the cockpit. The authorized acharyas who know the science perfectly install such temples of the Lord under regulative principles just to offer facilities to the common man. But persons who are less intelligent, without being conversant with the science, mistake this great attempt to be idol worship and poke their nose into that to which they have no access. Therefore, the ladies or men who observe festivals in the temples of the Lord just to have a look at the transcendental form are 1,000 times more glorious than those who are non-believers in the transcendental form of the Lord. So, as mentioned earlier, even among the theistic community, even among those who actually believe in God, even when they are bewildered by these impersonalist thoughts, so they, for such people, they cannot even realize the personal form of the Lord. So how can we actually entrust them to perform the service of deity worship when they cannot even understand the personal form of the Lord? It appears from this, from the verse, that the inhabitants of Dwarka were all owners of big palaces. This indicates the prosperity of the city. The ladies got up on the roofs just to have a look at the procession and the Lord. The ladies did not mix with the crowd on the street, and thus their respectability was perfectly observed. There was no artificial equality with the man. Female respectability is preserved more elegantly by keeping the women separate from the man. The sexes should not mix unrestrictedly. These were principles that were strictly observed in the previous yugas. So since we are now in Kali Yuga, the age of degradation, so it is absolutely okay to indulge in any sort of nonsense in the name of empowerment. Text 25. The inhabitants of Dwarka were regularly accustomed to look upon the reservoir of all beauty, the infallible Lord, yet they were never satiated. So in this verse, there's this word called Achyutam, the infallible. When the ladies of the city of Dwarka got up on the roofs of their palaces, they never thought that they had previously many times seen the beautiful body of the infallible Lord. This indicates that they had no satiation in desiring to see the Lord. Anything material seen for a number of times ultimately becomes unattractive by the law of satiation. So this is the problem with material sense gratification. Due to our foolishness, we have actually degraded ourselves by being trapped in this material body because of our desire to enjoy sense gratification, material sense gratification. But it is clearly stated in the Gita, like in verse 2.14 and also in 5.22. In verse 5.22, Krishna says, Yei samsparja boga dukkha yone evati adi antavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate buddha. This all these material sense gratifications which arise by the perception of the senses with sense objects, they are the causes of misery. And even these so-called pleasures, they have a beginning and an end. So those who are truly intelligent, they will never engage in material sense gratification. So as long as we are we subject ourselves to material sense gratification, we will always have to suffer because of the dualities of this material world. The material world is full of dualities like happiness, distress, success, failure, and many other dualities. So it is due to our foolishness that we have actually degraded ourselves to this position, simply because we wanted to enjoy material sense gratification. So as long as we are obsessed with this desire to enjoy material sense gratification, we will only be switching between these dualities of being happy for a certain period of time, followed by distress. So that is the problem with this material world, which is full of dualities. However, anything that is spiritual, it is completely free from such dualities. Even in chapter 15 of the Gita, in 15.5, it is stated that those who desire liberation, they should be completely free from dualities first. Right? Like that is a precondition which actually qualifies us for liberation. We should be free from dualities. As long as we are obsessed with this desire for material sense gratification, we can never even liberate ourselves from the clutches of these material dualities. On the contrary, anything that is spiritual, it will we will never be satiated or be bored in seeing anything that is spiritual. So that's why it is explained here that looking at the transcendental form of the Lord is completely different from other types of material sense gratification. This indicates that they had no satiation in desiring to see the Lord. Anything material seen for a number of times ultimately becomes unattractive by the law of satiation. The law of satiation acts materially, but there's no scope for it in the spiritual realm. The word infallible is significant here because although the Lord has mercifully descended to the earth, he is still infallible. This has also been explained in Gita chapter 15, especially towards the end in 3 verses, 15.16, 15.17, and 15.18. In those verses, Krishna talks about the living beings. There are 2 categories of living beings, the fallible and infallible living beings. The fallible living beings are those who reside in the material world. The infallible living beings are those in the spiritual world. So even the liberated souls, those who have been liberated when they enter into the spiritual world, they become infallible. However, they are still distinguished from the Supreme Lord. And especially in verse 15.18, Krishna says how he, being the Supreme Person, Purushottama, he is actually transcendental to these 2 different types of beings. He is the transcendental Supreme Person, Purushottama, who is beyond the fallible and infallible living beings. So even when he descends to the material world, he remains transcendental. The living entities are fallible because when they come in contact with the material world, they lack their spiritual identity. And thus the body materially obtained becomes subjected to birth, growth, transformation, situation, deterioration, and annihilation under the laws of nature. So our original identity is that we have always been, we are actually spirit souls. We also have qualitatively similar features like the Supreme Lord. Since we are also eternal fragmental parts of the Supreme Lord, we also have very qualitatively similar qualities as the Supreme Lord, like Satchit Ananda qualities. But due to our degraded condition of being encaged in this material body, so we are forced to take up different material bodies, and the body actually goes through the 6 stages, and upon death, the material body is discarded, and the spirit soul is forced to be encaged in a different type of material body. But the Lord's body is not like that. Though he descends to the material world, he descends in his original transcendental form, his original transcendental body. His transcendental body is never different from his soul. So that is the difference between us and the Supreme Lord. We, our spirit soul is encaged within this fallible material body. But the Supreme Lord, even when he descends to the material world, he descends in his original transcendental form, his transcendental body, and that's why even when Lord Krishna left this material world at the age of 125, he was still he still appeared with his ever youthful looks. So that is the difference between us as fallible living beings and the infallible Supreme Lord. He descends as he is and is now, never under the laws of the material modes. So the Lord's transcendental body is immune to all these laws of material nature. As we know, the three main aspects of the material nature, the three modes of material nature, they are the three puppeteers who control us in every aspect. We are all puppets in the hands of the three puppeteers, the three modes of material nature. However, these modes of material nature, they are mere byproducts of the Supreme Lord's material energy. And since the modes themselves originate from the Supreme Lord, so the Supreme Lord never becomes subjected to these modes of material nature. So the transcendental body of the Supreme Lord, even when he descends to the material world, is immune from the laws of material nature. And that's why Krishna especially mentions in Gita 9.11, Avajanati Mamura Manushim Tanu Ashritam Parambhava Majananto Mamabhuta Maheshwaram. So in that verse, Krishna says that fools deride me when I descend to the material world, merely because I appear in a human-like form. Though Lord Krishna descended to the material world in a human-like form, it was not like he was a mortal human being. He appeared in his transcendental form, and that's why we celebrate the appearance day of the Supreme Lord. It is not like he was born and he died on a particular day. It's not like even for us, since we are also spirit souls, there is no birth or death for the spirit souls. But just because we are conditioned souls, we are forced to take up a new body and discard our existing body. So that's how we are forced to undergo birth and death. But for the Supreme Lord, even when he descends to the material world, he is completely immune to all these aspects of the material world. So that is the difference between us and the Supreme Lord. So it is completely foolish to propagate this flawed notion that even human beings can be like God, I'm God, you are God, everything is God. So these are clearly these notions have been completely demolished in all our authentic scriptures. No one, therefore, is saturated by seeing the transcendental body of the Lord, because there are always manifestations of newer and newer beauties, the transcendental name manifestations, and there is no satiation in chanting the whole name of the Lord. There is no satiation in discussing the qualities of the Lord, and there is no limitation of the entourage of the Lord. He is the source of all and is limitless. Text 26. The Lord's chest is the abode of the goddess of fortune. His moon-like face is the drinking vessel for eyes which hanker after all that is beautiful. His arms are the resting places for the administrative demigods, and his lotus feet are the refuge of pure devotees who never talk or sing of any subject except his lordship. There are different classes of human beings, all seeking different enjoyments from different objects. There are persons who are seeking after the favor of the goddess of fortune. And for them, the Vedic literatures give information that the Lord is always served with all reverence by thousands and thousands of goddesses of fortune at the Chintamani Dhama, the transcendental abode of the Lord, where the trees are all desire trees and the buildings are made of touchstone. The Lord Govinda is engaged there in herding the Surabhi cows as his natural occupation. These goddesses of fortune can be seen automatically if we are attracted by the bodily features of the Lord. So this is the description from Brahma Samhita 5.29. Chintamani Prakrasatmasu Kalpaviksha Lakshavateshu Surabhi Ravi Palayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Sata Sambrama Sevyamanam Govinda Madhipurusham Tamam Bhajami. The goddesses of fortune, they themselves are actually under the control of the Supreme Lord. But foolish demons like Ravana, he actually wanted to enjoy the goddess of fortune by without the Supreme Lord. So we know what was the result of such foolishness. The impersonalists cannot observe such goddesses of fortune because of their dry speculative habit. And those who are artists overtaken by the beautiful creation should better see to the beautiful face of the Lord for complete satisfaction. The face of the Lord is the embodiment of beauty. What they call beautiful nature is but his smile, and what they call the sweet songs of the birds are but specimens of the whispering voice of the Lord. So even in chapter 10 of the Gita, in the last two verses, it is clearly stated that Krishna clearly mentions that whatever opulence that we see in this material world, whether it's the material world or the spiritual world, all the opulences are mere sparks of his own opulence. So whether it is the opulence of beauty, wealth, strength, of all those six opulences are whatever we see in this material world are mere sparks of the opulence of the Supreme Lord. The kind of opulences that we witness in this material world are sparks which originate from the opulence of the Supreme Lord. There are administrative demigods in charge of departmental service of cosmic management, and there are tiny administrative gods in the state service. They are always afraid of other competitors, but if they take shelter of the arms of the Lord can protect them always from the attacks of enemies. A faithful servant of the Lord engaged in the service of administration is the ideal executive head and can well protect the interests of the people in general. Other so-called administrators are symbols of anachronisms, leading to the acute distress of the people who are governed by them. The administrators can remain safely under the protection of the arms of the Lord. The essence of everything is the Supreme Lord. He is called the Saram, and those who sing and talk about him are called the Sarangas or the pure devotees. The pure devotees are always hankering after the lotus feet of the Lord. The lotus has a kind of honey which is transcendently reddish after the honey. Srila Rupa Goswami, the great devotee Acharya of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, has sung a song about this lotus honey, comparing himself to the bee. O my Lord Krishna, I beg to offer my prayers unto you. My mind is like the bee, and it is after some honey. Kindly, therefore, give my bee mind a place at your lotus feet, which are the resources for all transcendental honey. I know that even big demigods like Brahma do not see the rays of the nails of your lotus feet, even though they are engaged in deep meditation for years together. Still, O infallible one, my ambition is such, for you are very merciful to your surrendered devotees. O Madhava, I know also that I have no genuine devotion for the service of your lotus feet, but because your lordship is inconceivably powerful, you can do what is impossible to be done. Your lotus feet can deride even the nectar of the heavenly kingdom, and therefore I am very much attracted by them. O Supreme Eternal, please therefore let my mind be fixed at your lotus feet, so that eternally I may be able to relish the taste of your transcendental service. The devotees are satisfied with being placed at the lotus feet of the Lord and have no ambition to see his all beautiful face or aspire for the protection of the strong arms of the Lord. They are humble by nature, and the Lord is always leaning towards such humble devotees. So any intelligent person who actually wants to liberate himself would not merely aspire for heavenly pleasures, because being promoted to the heavenly planets is not liberation. We can only liberate ourselves from the material bondage and even from all the dualities of the material world if we aim for the spiritual world to regain our eternal association with the Supreme Lord. So as long as we are part of this material world, regardless of whether in this middle earth planet or in the upper planets or even in the lower planets, which may be more materially opulent compared to even the upper planets, we can never free ourselves from the material bondages, because we will always be subject to dualities. So we'll always be experiencing happiness for some time, followed by distress. So this there will always be changing pain and pleasure kind of experiences all the time, as long as we are subjected to these material dualities. But if we are able to regain our original identity as eternal servants of the Supreme Lord, then we can attain permanent bliss. So bliss is what we should aim for, not mere happiness in this material world. Text 27. As the Lord passed along the public road of Dwaraka, his head was protected from the sunshine by a white umbrella. White feathered fans moved in semicircles, and showers of flowers fell upon the road. His yellow garments and garlands of flowers made it appear as if a dark cloud was surrounded simultaneously by sun, moon, lightning, and rainbows. The sun, moon, rainbow, and lightning do not appear in the sky simultaneously. When there is sun, the moonlight becomes insignificant. And if there are clouds and a rainbow, there's no manifestation of lightning. The Lord's bodily hue is just like a new monsoon cloud. He is compared herein to the cloud. The white umbrella over his head is compared to the sun. The movement of the bunch hair fan of flukes is compared to the moon. The showers of flowers are compared to the stars. His yellow garments are compared to the rainbow. So all these activities of the firmament, being impossible simultaneous factors, cannot be adjusted by comparison. The adjustment is possible only when we think of the inconceivable potency of the Lord. The Lord is all powerful, and in his presence, anything impossible can be made possible by his inconceivable energy. But the situation created at the time of his passing on the roads of Dwaraka was beautiful and could not be compared to anything besides the description of natural phenomena. So when we talk about the sun, moon, and even the other planets, the sun, moon, and other planets, they also have their presiding deities, the predominating deities in those planets. They are the personification of those planets. But as Krishna says in the Gita 5.29, Bhoktaram Yaknitapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. Sarvaloka Maheshwaram merely means that he is the controller, the supreme controller of all planets. When Krishna says that he is the supreme controller of all planets, then clearly he means that he is also the supreme controller of all the demigods. So in that verse, Krishna makes it very clear that Bhoktaram Yaknitapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suhurdam Sarvabhutanam Nyatma Mam Shanti Mrichati. I'm the supreme enjoyer of all sacrifices. I'm the supreme controller of all the planets. I'm the supreme well-wisher of all living entities. Those who know these attributes of myself, they can attain peace. So if we if we understand that Krishna is the supreme controller, then there's no need for us to pray to the various demigods, but simply by being surrendered to the supreme controller, he himself will make the necessary arrangements, because even all the planets and the presiding deities of those planets are under his control. Text 28. After entering the house of his father, he was embraced by the mothers present, and the Lord offered his obeisances unto them by placing his head at their feet. The mothers were headed by Devaki, his real mother. It appears that Vasudeva, the father of Lord Krishna, had completely separate residential quarters where he lived with his 18 wives, out of whom Srimati Devaki is the real mother of Lord Krishna. But in spite of this, all other stepmothers were equally affectionate to him, as will be evident from the following verse. Lord Krishna also did not distinguish his real mother from his stepmothers, and he equally offered his obeisances unto all the wives of Vasudeva present on the occasion. According to scriptures also, there are 7 mothers: the real mother, the wife of the spiritual master, the wife of a Brahmana, the wife of the king, the cow, the nurse, and the earth. All of them are mothers. Even by this injunction of the Shastras, the stepmother, who is the wife of the father, is also as good as the mother, because the father is also one of the spiritual masters. Lord Krishna, the Lord of the universe, plays the part of an ideal son just to teach others how to treat their stepmothers. Text 29. The mothers, after embracing their son, set him on their laps. Due to pure affection, milk sprang from their breasts. They were overwhelmed with delight, and the tears from their eyes wetted the Lord. When Lord Krishna was at Vrindavana, even the cows would become moistened by affection towards him, and he would draw milk from the nipples of every affectionate living being. So what to speak of the stepmothers, who are already as good as his own mother. Text 30. Thereafter, the Lord entered his palaces, which were perfect to the fullest extent. His wives lived in them, and they outnumbered over 16,000. Lord Krishna had 16,108 wives, and for each and every one of them, there was a fully equipped palace, complete with necessary compounds and gardens. Full description of these palaces is given in the 10th canto. All the palaces were made of the best marble stone. They were illuminated by jewels and decorated by curtains and carpets of velvet and silk, nicely bedecked and embroidered with gold lace. The personality of Godhead means one who is full with all power, all energy, all opulences, all beauties, all knowledge, and all renunciation. Therefore, in the palaces of the Lord, there was nothing wanting for fulfilling all desires of the Lord. The Lord is unlimited, and therefore his desires are also unlimited, and the supply is also unlimited. Everything being unlimited, it is concisely described here as Sarva Kamam, or full with all desirable equipment. Regarding this opulence of the Supreme Lord, even in Gita, verse 2.2, the purport is divided into 2 parts. In the first half of the purport, Prabhupada describes the term Bhagavan according to the level of realization of absolute truth. And in the second half of the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes the meaning of Bhagavan according to the criteria explained by Parashara Muni. So according to that criteria, Bhagavan is the owner of all opulences, particularly the 6 opulences: wealth, strength, beauty, fame, knowledge, renunciation. So Bhagavan is the one who has all these 6 opulences in abundance, in unlimited quantity. So for us as human beings, we don't even have 1 or 2 of such opulences, and that too, even if we have 1 or 2 of such opulences, we have it in a very, very minute quantity. And on the contrary, the Supreme Lord has all the 6 opulences in abundance, and that's how he was able to maintain so many palaces. And as described in the 10th canto, Lord Krishna was personally present in all these 16,000 palaces through his various expansions. Even when we look at the Goloka chart, there are 3 main parts in the Goloka chart. The topmost part is the Goloka region, followed by the Vaikuntha region and the material world region, Devidama. So in Goloka Dhama itself, in Goloka region, it is divided into three parts: Goloka Vrindavan, then Mathura and Dwarka. In Goloka Vrindavana, Lord Krishna is present in his Swayam Rupa. The original form of the Supreme Lord is there in Goloka Vrindavana, and then in the Goloka chart, it is clearly shown how the different expansions are formed. So in Dwarka, especially in these 16,000 palaces, Lord Krishna was personally present in the form of a personal expansion in all the 16,000 palaces. It was not like he was visiting one palace at one time. He was personally present there in each of his palaces. So we even saw in one of the previous verse that even the normal residents of Dwarka, they themselves had houses which were similar to palatial houses. So the Supreme Lord was, he actually owned 16,000 palaces, which were abundantly equipped with all the opulences. So that's why the Supreme Lord Krishna has been explained as Swayam Bhagavan. Even in the third chapter of Bhagavatam, Canto 1, we saw all the 22 incarnations of Krishna have been explained in the first 27 verses. The 22 incarnations of Krishna were explained and up to Kalki Avatar. But in verse 28 of the third chapter in Canto 1, it has been mentioned that Iti Cham Sakala Pumsa Krishnas to Bhagavan Swayam. So when Lord Krishna descended to the material world, he descended by exhibiting all his complete opulences in full. Compared to the other incarnations, even in the incarnation of Lord Rama, he actually appeared as a human being with all the human-like qualities. In that incarnation, it was like a portion of the Swayam Rupa. But when Lord Krishna descended to the material world, he descended and he exhibited all his complete opulences. So that's why it has clearly been mentioned by Vyasadev himself in Bhagavatam 1.3.28 that Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam. So we have completed until text 30. So that's all for today. Any questions or comments?
Everything is okay, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you. Before I end, just want to make an announcement. Our next Bhagavatam class will be on Friday, next Friday, because for those who are attending my Friday thematic studies. So last Friday we did our Ishopanishad session. We actually have about 2 or 3 more sessions for the Ishopanishad, but I'm planning to conduct 2 sessions on Purushottam Yoga, chapter 15 of the Gita. So I'm planning to cover that chapter at least before the end of this Purushottam month. So I'm planning to do the first half. Chapter 15 of Gita has 20 verses. So this Friday, we'll be looking at the first half of chapter 15, the first 10 verses. And then next Tuesday, I'm planning to complete the remaining section, the second half of the chapter on Purushottam Yoga. So next Tuesday, we won't be having a Bhagavatam class. I'll do it on next Friday. So that's all. Thanks for attending. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare
Yes,
Krishna,
thank you,
sir.
Prabhu.
Thank
Hare
you,
Krishna.
Prabhu.